that that are linked to this wonderful new organisation are certainly sentiments and values that we share here at the university. And I think it's really exciting to focus on regional women lawyers as well. They're often a group, I think, that are overlooked and who have a whole range of different issues and concerns, and are also, I think, a very effective lobby group for the future. We all know in relation to regional lawyers that there can be a shortage, and there certainly is an issue in relation to access to justice. It's sometimes referred to as the postcode justice issue. And having more female lawyers, more women lawyers involved in regional areas is a really important part of attempting to cure some of those access to justice problems. So I'm delighted to be here and delighted to welcome Michelle as the president, and also the very amazing speakers who are going to be here, and I'm sure Michelle will talk more about them. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Tania, and thank you very much for welcoming us here today. So we're here today to celebrate the launch of this exciting new initiative, the New South Wales Regional Women Lawyers. We're a group of energetic women lawyers here based in regions around New South Wales who have come together to form this new association to represent the needs specifically of those women lawyers working in rural, regional and remote areas in New South Wales. We had a lot of interest in tonight's event. We actually had to move the venue because there was too many people for our first venue, so thank you to the university for accommodating us. Now, in the regions of New South Wales, lawyers every day are serving their communities, upholding the rule of law and justice in their communities, whether it's on the coastal communities of the Central Coast and the North and South Coast, in inner west, central west, far west, and on the river communities down near the Murrumbidgee. Women lawyers are running successful law firms, employing solicitors, running trials and working with the difficulties that we often face in the regions of distance, delay, lack of resources for our courts and our justice system. And those are some of the areas that we're hoping to address with the new organisation. One of the aims that we have is to ensure that women lawyers in rural, regional and remote areas have the same opportunities as our CBD counterparts. With the pandemic, we've had new opportunities as women lawyers in the regions to participate in the justice system through online court, and many of those things are here to stay for the better. And it also means that we have unique opportunities available to us now at this point in time as regional, remote and rural women lawyers to participate in shaping the justice system for our state. So that's one of the things that we are working towards. As Tania has outlined, many firms in the regions face real difficulties retaining lawyers, and some of the speakers today will deal with that issue and some of those problems. There's more First Nations lawyers now working in our communities, seeking more access to justice for their communities and to address the very serious Indigenous incarceration rates in New South Wales. So connecting with other lawyers across the state is one of the real aims of our organisation. As lawyers, our jobs can be very hard every day, and in rural, regional and remote areas, sometimes even more difficult. It's even more important that we are able to reach out and connect with colleagues, to have the opportunity to debrief and support each other through difficult times. So I'm a solicitor based on the Central Coast. I've got a firm in Terrigal, a family law firm. One of my lawyers, Ayana's here today. Hi, Ayana. So it's one of the really wonderful things about working in the regions is getting to know your communities. I was on the Regional Law Society of the Central Coast as a secretary for a number of years, and that's actually very fulfilling. If anyone isn't yet involved in their regional law societies, I encourage you to do so. It's a great way to network with the other lawyers in your regions. As our organisation is newly formed, there's some important work that we'll be doing in coming weeks. We have an exciting event planned for the 24th of March in Orange. There's going to be a full-day conference, and we've got some wonderful speakers lined up. That is going to be on Friday the 24th of March, and there will also be a dinner the evening before if anyone's available to attend. We have speakers lined up, including a barrister, Kim Bircher, Regional Lawyer of the Year from Mudgee, Sally Hallander, and solicitor Helen McGowan, who's a contributing author to The Place of Practice, a really important book about regional and rural lawyers. And we'll also be hearing from Trish Mundy shortly, who's also on our committee and one of our speakers tonight, and we thank her for joining us. So look out for the more details about that event. Save the date, the 24th of March. There'll be something coming out later this week with more details about all the speakers, but we're very much looking forward to that event, and we're planning to have regular events at venues in the regions to be able to collaborate with other regional lawyers and share resources, network. Some of the things that we'll be talking about at that event are marketing your regional law practice, moving into other areas of practice, and really practical tools for regional lawyers in relation to their daily work. The organisation has a number of committee members who I'd like to introduce to you now as well. We have Jen Spears. She is in Dubbo. She is at a firm in Dubbo, and she's our vice chair. She's also the president of the Arana Law Society, and she's the Bushweb chair for the New South Wales Young Lawyers, and she's sat on various committees, including the Rural Issues Committee. We'd also like to welcome Nicole Armitage. She's our secretary and treasurer. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for all your work in getting things organised for the organisation. It's been great, all those little things behind the scenes Nicole's been looking after. So Nicole has been practising as a solicitor for over 22 years, and she has a firm, E-Conveyancing New South Wales, and she's a costs assessor for the Supreme Court. Catherine Henry here in Newcastle also is a mid-sized regional firm here, and she runs a firm which has the largest health law practice in regional New South Wales. So obviously lots of problems for access to services in that area of health, and lots of issues in relation to health and medical law in the region. So Catherine's also formerly the president of the Newcastle Regional Law Society and member of the Council of the University of Newcastle. And she's also been a recipient of a number of awards, including Australian Law Awards Regional Lawyer of the Year and the New South Wales Local Woman of the Year due to her community involvement. So Catherine's been a driving force behind this organisation, and thank you, Catherine, for all of that work. And Bronwyn Ambragetti is another of the driving forces over there, sitting very quietly in the back row. So Bronwyn is the managing solicitor. Most of you probably know her in the room today, of the Hunter Community Legal Centre. And Bronwyn was a great mentor for me when I was doing my practical legal training on the Central Coast at the Central Coast Community Legal Centre. And so it's been, she's been very much a driving force in this newly formed organisation also. We also have our committee, Garnia Dibb, who's in the Southern Highlands, and I think she's online somewhere today. She is a family dispute resolution practitioner, an arbitrator and mediator, and she's also been practising for over 22 years. She is got her firm on the Southern Highlands GDA Lawyers, and she's completed a Master of Laws and is in the process of completing a Masters of Islamic Studies. So it's great to have somewhere down in the Southern Highlands to be part of New South Wales Regional Women Lawyers. And then Trish Mundy, who will be speaking with us shortly. She's a Professor of Law and Chief Integrity Officer at the University of Wollongong. She led the establishment and operation of a new integrity division at the University of Wollongong, and she was previously served in a range of law leadership roles, including as the Dean of Law at the University of Wollongong until quite recently. She's developed and taught subjects on legal practice in rural and regional areas, and she's a co-author of the book which I commend to you, which is the Place of Practice, Lawyering in Rural and Regional Australia. It's worthwhile reading, and I'll pass you over to Trish to speak with us today.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and a special thank you also to Catherine Henry, who invited me to speak, and thank you to all of the committee, and hello to everyone there. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and so pleased to see the inception of a Rural Women Lawyers Association. It's something very close to my heart, so exciting times ahead. I want to acknowledge beautiful Dharawal country from where I'm speaking with you today in Wollongong, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I've got about 15 minutes, and what I wanted to do was talk with you a little bit about my research journey in the rural legal practice space over the last 15 years or so. Because I think it really captures something of the changes that we're seeing in rural legal practice and women's representation and experiences in the context of rural practice. As Michelle mentioned, I came from a rural legal practice background myself, having practiced in Nowra and in Lismore and other regional centres as well. But with the Women's Legal Centre for many years as well, doing a lot of rural and regional outreach across New South Wales and Indigenous communities, with Indigenous communities. And so it's something that, you know, my interest in the lived experience of rural practitioners, where that came about. So in 2008, I was actually a lawyer at the Northern Rivers Community Legal Centre in Lismore, and I was tasked with working on a project that looked at some of the barriers and challenges around attracting and retaining lawyers in rural, regional and remote communities as an access to justice issue. And I did that project, and it culminated in, I think, a fairly comprehensive review of literature and a scoping project, and it led to a report that is available on the web if you're interested. That was in 2008. And so I left the centre to go into academic life. That was kind of, well, almost the start of my academic life. But I decided that I actually really wanted to continue this work and continue a focus on rural legal practice particularly. And I did that through my PhD or doctoral studies. And at the time of doing that work, back in 2009, you know, I realised there was actually a fair bit of research and anecdotal material that looked at the experiences and challenges of women lawyers in the legal profession generally. But what I didn't see really at all was anything that spoke to the particular experiences of women lawyers in rural, regional and remote communities. So I decided that actually I wanted to find out more about intersections of gender and rural place. And so I did my PhD on this. So what I'm going to do now is actually just share my screen here and just actually hope that I've got this right. Are you able to see my screen there at all? I'm hoping. Oh, there it is. Hoping you can. So let me change that. Okay. So as I said, in 2009, I started some PhD research on the lived experiences of women lawyers in rural, regional and remote communities in Queensland. At the time, I was at Griffith University in Queensland, and so that's in part where that came from, but also because, interestingly, Queensland is probably the most regionalised legal profession, the most ruralised of any jurisdiction in Australia. So it seemed actually quite an interesting jurisdiction to choose. I was interested in how women lawyers experience, in women lawyers' experiences of rural, regional and remote practice, and how that might be different than women lawyers and some of the challenges more generally, and some of the particular opportunities of rural practice for women lawyers, and how the intersections of gender and rural space influence the legal practice experience. And so I did that through really in-depth interviews with 23 male and female lawyers working across rural areas in Queensland. And it really was the first of its kind to explore those intersections between gender and rurality in the context of legal practice. And in short, what it concluded was that women's practice experience can be much more complex and is shaped by a distinctive gendered experience, or at least that was my finding at the time. Now, in terms of, and I'm sorry, I'm changing it here. So in terms of that research, obviously what I want to do here is quickly start with a snapshot of what some of the opportunities were that I found in my research, and broadly that anecdotal evidence that existed at that time and since has shown. And this will likely be familiar to you, because it's probably some of the reasons about what drew you to rural practice. So, of course, the research showed that, opportunities for an enhanced lifestyle, greater ability to balance work and family responsibilities, that it's professionally rewarding in that you get a much greater breadth of legal practice experience and responsibility much more quickly. And you're given that much earlier in your career. It's a very collegial style of practice, and you're very much embedded in community. And there's lots of opportunity that comes with being embedded in community. So certainly the research showed lots of great opportunities for people that are choosing to practice, and women particularly identified as being great about rural practice. Some of the, here we go, right. But equally, back in 2010, my research, as I said, did conclude that women can experience a number of unique challenges associated with their gender and practicing in their rural community. And the image you see here is actually depicts the kind of traditional notions of the rural lawyer in this UK book called Gumboot Practice, Portrait of a Country Solicitor. So it's kind of depicting what we might see as the traditional notion of the rural lawyer, which was, a kind of, older white male. But essentially, the women that I spoke to in my research, and I'll talk about perhaps what some of the changes might be as we skip forward to 2020 and 2022. But some of the challenges identified by the women that I spoke to, and some of the themes were around the idea of the old boys network. So a number of female lawyers I spoke to talked about the operation of the old boys network. We've heard often about the boys network in the context of legal practice more generally in the legal profession, but here in the rural context, we talk about the old boys network. So the presence and the domination of perhaps older men in legal practice, often who are sole practitioners, with more traditional and conservative gender roles that are operating in the context of rural practice, the presence of kind of rural masculinities or ideas about what it means to be a man or male in rural communities that can often influence social and professional relationships. Particular challenges around reduced anonymity and increased visibility in the context of rural practice, and also particular experiences that are shaped by whether you are from a community or whether you're seen as an outsider. Now, I could talk about each of these for a lot longer, obviously, but I just wanted to give a snapshot of what some of my research showed around some of the particular gender challenges that were identified back in 2010, 2011, in the context of my research. And I can talk more about those at other times. But what I really wanted to share with you now was that is to fast forward a decade, I guess, because what I've found is that we have some really interesting and potentially significant changes that have been taking place over the last decade in the context of rural practice. And we've got here a bit of a graph. Now, interestingly, it's only since 2012 that we have national statistics on the legal profession. And New South Wales have been amazing in collecting data for a lot of years, but interestingly, they don't collect data around gender and location. So really, that's not going to help us much. But the National Legal Profession Statistics, they started in 2012, and they do tell us a bit about really gender and location. So in taking a look at this, I've tried to construct this from that first time until the last time that the National Legal Profession Statistics were produced in 2020. So what we can see here in 2012 is that basically we started with a 60-40 split of male to female lawyers, with male practitioners making up 60% of rural practice. Fast forward to 2020, and we actually see that that women now comprise almost 54%. So it's a 55-45% split in gender, with more women than men practicing in country or rural areas. That is an amazing shift in a decade. And yes, some of that is because we've seen an increasing number of women entering the profession, so greater numbers of women, and that's naturally going to have a flow-on effect. But interestingly, the increase is in large part due to a quite significant number of early career women lawyers entering rural practice. And I'm just going to show you this graph here, which actually looks at early career lawyers, male and female early career lawyers. And you can actually see that we've got 60 in 2012. We started, perhaps even before 2012 actually, but I can't tell you that because we don't have that data. But certainly from 2012, we can see that there's 62.5 as opposed to 37.5 female to male representation in rural practice. So, and in 2020, we're seeing that 67% of all early career lawyers, so lawyers who have got their practicing certificate in the last 5 years, are actually entering into the rural legal profession. That's a huge, quite significant numbers. And so what I was interested in actually finding out was, okay, well, what might that actually mean for the lived experience of women lawyers in rural practice? What does that mean for the legal practice experience? And so I was interested in revisiting the research that I started back in 2009 to really get a sense of, okay, what does that mean? And now I'm in incredibly early days of that, but what I'm going to do is actually put in the chat, if I may, a survey that I have, that I've been doing for the last little while of early career lawyers, both male and female early career lawyers, about their motivation for entering rural practice, about the relative satisfaction levels, about what drew them there, and a range of other issues as well. And looking at, okay, what are the opportunities and challenges as, men and women early career lawyers are currently experiencing, and in order to really get a sense of what that might mean for rural practice. So I'll put that in the chat, and if you are an early career lawyer, or I would love you to pass that on to any early career lawyer that you know of in your network. But one of the things I did was a survey, and to date, I think I have around 60 or 70 lawyers who've responded to that. They're not all early career lawyers. But my other stage two, and you'll have, if you complete the survey, you'll have the opportunity to do that, is to indicate to me that you're keen to engage in a much more detailed interview with me, where I can explore some of the themes and unpack them a bit more with you. And if you're interested in that, I would love to hear from you. But in terms of the interviews, I've conducted a few of those so far, but really I'm in the very early stage. So it's literally I'm at the point of what I'm terming the castle, which is really I'm sharing with you now, which is the vibe of it. And the vibe. So back in 2009, 2010, I was really, really seeing some strong themes around, a very traditional, conservative, challenging legal practice experience for many women. Of course, not all, but there were distinctive gendered themes. And, I'm rolling forward now to, 2020, 2021, 2022, where I'm talking with some women. And for me, I haven't analysed the data, but there is a definite noticing by women and by me in the context of the women that I'm talking to, that there were many more women in their communities of practice. There were certainly comments by the women I spoke to about a feeling of change in the profession. They really spoke about women's network in much stronger terms, and that those relationships were actually much more present. And there was really a feeling of a critical mass of women's presence within the firm and within the community, and that was really influential. So for me, I'm really keen to get a sense of what the last decade or so has really meant for not only the legal practice experience but for communities themselves, because my sense is that actually the change is quite meaningful. And I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts on it, and whether through the survey or whether sending me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat as well. I'd love to hear from you on the ground in your rural community as well, and what's happening for you there. So I'm going to stop there because I did have 15 minutes and I promised I'd keep it short. But look, thank you. I will stop sharing, and I could share a lot more, but happy to share that at another point. But thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Trish, and we're so pleased to have you join us tonight, and also join our committee. The length of time that you've been studying this area and the research over time is something that's really quite interesting in the changes that have occurred, and it must be quite satisfying to actually see some progress in terms of what you were seeing in 2010 and 2011 to now.
Look, it absolutely is, and I guess there've been a number of people that have been working in this space, both in the university space, and I recall in 2012 we had people like Jennifer Nielsen at Southern Cross University. We had Amanda Kennedy at University of New England. We had USQ up in Queensland. We had a whole network of people who were really working to try to embed the presence of rural practice within legal education, because we felt like that was really a missing piece, and universities had a responsibility and an opportunity to actually support and help prepare students for a rural practice experience, and to let them know what some of the opportunities were and also some of the challenges, and to help better prepare prospective law students who were interested in rural practice, or to show that as a career pathway. And I feel like that is some of the piece over the years that I think we've gotten much better, both in terms of professional bodies and also universities in working together to do just that. And I'm just really excited at the launch of this network, because I feel like it's another tool and another way of actually really giving the kudos and promoting rural practice in the way that it deserves.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very satisfying, I find, to be a lawyer and in a regional community, because you do become so embedded in the community, like you said, in those terms, and you have opportunities outside your office door or outside the court door to get involved in the community, which you never would have otherwise. And so, it's not just benefiting our clients and ourselves, but to have these, it's actually benefiting our whole community, I think, because of the ways we can contribute, and it's even more important in rural and regional remote communities. One of the things you touched on is the statistics about the genders in the profession, and I know that the Law Society, I also sit on the Council of the Law Society, and I'm aware that there's been a State of the Profession report that was published for members last year, and I think that actually does have some data of the male and female breakdown in each region, which would be interesting to see how that's changing over time as well. Yeah. And there's also, I know that the Law Council of Australia is doing also great work in this area with their National Strategic Plan and the Digital Tree Change Initiative. I mean, all the firms I know on the Central Coast and around Newcastle are crying out for lawyers, finding it very hard to recruit lawyers, having to pay big incentives to lawyers to come and take up the role. So it's really important, I think, to have more of the practitioners who are wanting to stay or move to the regions, because it is such a wonderful place to practice. And then with the Women Lawyers Association also do a lot of work in this area with their regional chapters and the Australian Women Lawyers also. Now, and we'll move on to our next speaker tonight. So we've got Dr Natasha Cica, who is here from Tasmania. We'd like to welcome her tonight. Thank you, Natasha, for coming to join us. Lawyer who's contributed significantly to the development of lawyers in her region. She has been a legal and policy analyst advising the Parliament, crisis management, corporate law, and she's also been involved in think tanks, strategy for startups, broadcaster and public commentator. She has a very long resume, so I won't read it all out, but she was at one point one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence by the Australian Financial Review, and she runs a change consultancy called capacity.org and is an adjunct professor at the ANU College of Law. So welcome, Natasha.
It's just so wonderful to be in Newcastle. It's the most delightful city. I am very honoured to be here. I've been thinking a lot about what to say, and I'm really delighted that our last speaker spoke the way she did and gave such a beautiful, analytical and academically data-informed analysis of the state of play of what you're all trying to do here. I'm going to do something really different. I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to, based on what I know, and I'm going to point towards opening up dialogue, which seems to be one of the really beautiful goals and elements of this coalition of people that you're bringing together. So, as you mentioned, I'm from Lutruwita, Tasmania, and my mother's family, I'm the 6th generation of my mother's family to live in an unbroken line in Tasmania. And that family originally came as settlers from Ireland and then from Sweden. And they were really poor, but the thing that my mother's family had in common was a great dedication to education for girls. I don't know how interested they were in educating boys, but they were very interested in educating girls. And at the time, so my grandmother and my mother and all my aunts were really dedicated teachers in the public system in Tasmania, which, as you might know, has become tougher and tougher. Tasmania now faces very substantial literacy problems. Over 50% of Tasmanian women cannot read, are functionally illiterate, which I find an astonishing and borderline criminal statistic. But I digress. So we go back to my nana, Rose. She was born Rose Dwyer, and she was a farmer's wife in Scottsdale on a dairy farm in northwest Tasmania in the Great Depression, and they had no money, so she would walk to teach in the local high school, where she dragged kids through what was then Year 9, which was the highest educational aspiration for a lot of kids in that country town, and spent the money from her salary to get someone to clean the house and help with the kids because she was more interested in being in the classroom than doing housework. And her favourite saying was better dust on the brain than better dust on the shelf than dust on the brain. So she and my farmer grandfather were very dedicated to educating their girls. They also had a son. And they sent their girls to boarding school in Launceston. And all the farmers in Scottsdale said, Carl, why are you educating your girls? It's such a waste of money. And he said, well, they're bright girls and they need a good future. So they all did that. And then they all became teachers as well. They came down to Hobart on teacher training scholarships. So the point of that part of my story, which is not just my story, my family's story, my mother's story, my grandmother's story, but it's a very Tasmanian story, is that at that time, if you were a bright, sparky girl, you seemed to have two options presented to you. One was to be a teacher and one was to be a nurse. And all the women in my family didn't like blood and the muck of bodies, so they all went into teaching because they like words a lot. So then we scroll forward. I grew up in Hobart and in the 1980s, which was a really weird time in Tasmania. It was very, very conservative. Half my friends at school were gay men whose behaviour was criminalised, so they all left. The attitudes towards gender, I think, were like something out of Mad Men. I don't know how much they've actually changed. I think you'll find the milieu in Newcastle around gender and probably in the other regional centres in New South Wales much more progressive than still a lot of stuff that happens in Tasmania, but we persist. And so there I was, bright young thing, with the great fortune of a mother who was dedicated to education, so that was always supported, a father who was an immigrant from the former Yugoslavia, who was basically illiterate, but thought going to school was a good thing because the Nazis took that away from him. So I just kind of went like the clappers, and then I popped out, and the options that were the socially acceptable options that were presented to me were, well, you could do medicine or law. And like all the other women in my family, I don't like blood and guts and bodies very much. So I went, oh, I'll do law. So you could do architecture as well, or maybe be a pharmacist, but neither of those moved me. So I went to Canberra. And I went to the ANU and I did law, and I just loved it. It was the first time in my life I'd been surrounded by conversations about big national ideas. You know, we had the parliament, there was the diplomatic service, the ANU was still in its glory days where it was sloshing in cash and it could spend money on anything it wanted. You know, it's not so long ago really. And then I realised I loved law. It took me a while to realise why, and I realised I loved it because it's about the combination of power, justice and language. And they're the three things that really move me and still do. So there I was I was in the magic triangle in Australia because, you know, we were all told the only thing that happens that anyone wants to write about or listen to happened in Canberra, Sydney and Melbourne. So there it was, Canberra. And that was wonderful. I learned about public law. I learned about constitutional law. I learned process. I had process rammed into me until I could bear it no longer. Then I went to College of Law in Sydney. That was 1991, and I was in the first intake of College of Law, which is the legal practicing qualification. I was the first one where there were more women than men. And I remember thinking, oh, that's really interesting. Are we at a tipping point now? And I worked at Allen's. That was my first job, doing corporate law in Sydney. And again, I really loved it. It was a different world to me. People wore beautiful suits, beautiful clothes. We went for beautiful lunches and we did really interesting matters. And I was taught to write an exceptional letter, which is a skill that I use every day. And I was treated with great respect by the men and women I worked for. I think that's the workplace where I was treated the best ever. And I'm still very good friends with my peers and superiors from that time who didn't treat me like a woman lawyer. They treated me like a really good lawyer. I enjoyed being treated like a good lawyer. And at that time, I was very fortunate as well to be mentored by Wendy McCarthy, who is from Forbes, who's not a lawyer, but an amazingly dedicated person to lifting up all Australian women, but especially women in regional Australia, and Quentin Bryce, who was a lawyer and became the first woman Governor-General of Australia. So that just fell from the sky, and that changed my life as well. And then I did a lot of other things, but then I entered the third node of the magic triangle when I became the CEO of Harding Museum of Modern Art, because by that time I'd moved away from law and become more interested in how I could use those tools around advocacy and dialogue to build change that wasn't necessarily adversarial. So I've got to say the adversarial bit of law I don't love so much. It's useful and I will go hard. I won't say go hard like Vladimir Putin because you can't say that anymore. I'll go really hard, but I don't like it very much. I'd prefer to have this kind of gathering of people where people listen to each other and volunteer an opinion, and then we all somehow move together. So even if we don't agree on things now, we may find agreement about how we'd like things to be in 1, 3, 5 years' time. So all my methodology around facilitating groups of people who are struggling with difficult change operates on that principle. I've done some of that in post-war contexts in the Western Balkans because, you know, there was this horrible civil war there in the 30s and a lot of my family were engaged with that. So it just kind of iterates for me. It kind of keeps on going. So we scroll forwards. Melbourne was good, but at that time my father was ageing and becoming very unwell, and he had early stages of dementia and a whole lot of weird PTSD eruptions from his time as a child in the Second World War when the Nazis came to town. So I decided to move back to my roots. So I decided to move back to Tasmania and live in that rural, regional, remote. We've got them all. The whole of Tasmania is classified as rural, regional, remote, even the capital city. And did my best to navigate a really different piece in my life after this career, which was kicking all goals, lots of trophies on the shelf. I had to do the piece of being an at-home, after this, you know, rejecting the profession of cleaning up things and caring and bodies and stuff, there I was doing it with no training. So that's where I've been through COVID, done a lot of reflection, done a lot of examination of what law means to me. It's come back to those core things: power, justice, language. I think of them like a plait of hair. I love them all together. And I think about also the choices that I had as a young woman. I'm 55 now. I'm talking about choices I had 30 years ago. I think about my mum's choices, my beautiful grandmother's choices. And then I think, what are the choices that the next generation of women in regional Australia are going to make? Because there's clearly a whole lot of change happening now. We look at what happened with the Teal independents and people who are operating as independents, often women who are operating in business, and the kind of impact that had on generating and supporting a wave of change in the last federal election. I think that what you're doing with this network is another force of energy that can be harnessed for a lot of good for you professionally, a lot of good for your communities, and a lot of good for Australia as a whole. So excited to be here. If I met a 19-year-old student at university now and asked them what they want to do with their life, I don't know. Would they want to be an app designer? Would they want to run Chat-GPT? Would they want to start a fashion business? I don't know. I think things are changing really, really quickly. And so for me, another of the beautiful things about law is it gives you a framework and a stability and a way of structuring your thinking and calibrating your action as a responsible professional that is not available to all that many other people. So that's a great gift and a great privilege. So I'm really happy I did law. Catherine asked me the other day, do you still define yourself as a lawyer? And I had to go away and think. I thought, do I still define myself as a lawyer? And yes, I think I do. I do, because I believe that it is a label that I can wear with pride and use with effect, and I would like to do more and more of it. So thank you. And I think the best thing that you can do before you leave this room is get 3 contact numbers of people you don't know. Start a conversation with them, because only by building those conversations in this crazy world that we live in are we going to get people to still understand why process is important, why the rule of law is really, really important, and why what a lot of politicians tell you it is incorrect, and why power, justice and beauty are all part of the mission that a great lawyer can deliver, and why regional Australia, whether it's New South Wales, Lutruwita, South Australia, any of those other places, are actually really perfect petri dishes for all kinds of experiments and forwards-looking actions that we can roll out with and have a lot of fun along the way. So thank you again, and I look forward to talking to more of you as we socialise after this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Natasha. That was really inspiring. And yeah, your mentors, they sound incredible women. I think
Incredible women.
wow. And yeah, just that connection, I think, is something that's so precious as a woman lawyer and as a person in the community, and something that I think we're hoping to do with this organisation is just create those networks amongst regional communities to reach out and support each other. And there's always someone then you can pick up the phone and give a call to if you need a chat on just sharing strategies. And there is so much change, like you say, a groundswell happening. And I definitely agree with the sentiment that politicians' views of the rule of law is a little bit warped, and it's something that we can definitely all help contribute to uphold and a better understanding of that. So today we've got some membership forms here. If anyone would like to join, you can check out our website. We do have the event coming up on the 24th of March. Maybe Catherine, you'd like to say a few words about the upcoming events?
Not really, but just, I just encourage, it's, we're hoping to announce an outline of the program. I think you've articulated what there's some key themes. Collegiality, professional support and development. We're hoping to have a woman from who's been very active in the Western area of Sydney in mentoring and been recognised for her work, mentoring young lawyers and also women re-entering the profession. Talking, we've got a very well-known marketing and business development practitioner here in Newcastle who's done some work in professional service areas. So lots of very inspiring women. We chose Orange because it's a beautiful regional city that I'm sure that will be attractive in itself. It happens to coincide with a food and wine festival, which is also a good incentive. So we hope that a number of boxes are ticked. We would really love to see as many of you out there as possible. It also, of course, does coincide with the end of the CLE years, so you can tick your yes, I've got my 10 points because I attended the inaugural conference of Regional Women Lawyers. So thank you very much for coming today. It's been a bit of a whirlwind to get this show on the road in a very short period of time. We've had a nucleus of very dedicated, enthusiastic women who are Nicole, Bronwyn, Michelle, Catherine McKenzie and I. And we're really proud of what we've achieved and excited for what we can achieve. So thanks, everybody. That's enough, and let's all have a drink.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, please enjoy the refreshments. And
What do we say back in No, slip it in my this here pocket.